What's up, guys? Thanks for joining another episode of Cars, Bikes, and Coffee, where we like to save and restore cars. We are finally heading off to the shop. Now, this has been put off for quite a while. We've been trying to work through some logistics and some planning, and of course, the current events have kind of also played a part in delaying this, but now we're finally getting onto it. So I thank you for your patience and understanding. So what our focus is for today is we're going to start putting the pieces of the suspension and making the shell a roller. It is sitting on the lift. We were able to do that off camera and take it off of the rotisserie. And what we want to do now is get it ready for the body shop to fix the dents and fix some of the rust spots, and then of course paint it overall. So let's get to the shop and get this thing rolling. All right, so here we are working on the Z finally, and you can see that we went with an orange color. So what we want to do now is start by getting the front cross member on. We've gone through and painted all of the items, and even the stuff for the rear is over there. We've got bolt sets for the suspension from Z Car Source, and we have some new joints. So let's first start by getting the cross member and finding the bolts that we need to put that up. So what I definitely recommend is going through, especially with this where we just have it marked front suspension, is just laying out all of your bolts and group them so you know exactly the sizes, and then you can figure out, you don't know off the top of your head, where they go. So these are going to be our bolts for the front suspension. So now that we have the bolts sorted, what we want to do is start putting the bushings into the control arms, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to have the new bushings, and all the links to these parts will be down below in the description. But you'll notice you have two narrow and two thick. And what we want to do is the thick goes on the firewall side or the rear of the vehicle, and this goes on the front. So what we're going to do is lube these up and then insert them into the control arm, and then lube the steel tube and insert that as well. Alright, so the bushings for the control arms are lubed and ready for install. We've got our washers, our special washers for the cross member. So we're going to take the cross member and match it up to the front, and we're just going to hand tighten the bolts and torque them to spec. Alright, so we got the struts on, so now what we want to do is move to putting the ball joints. These are brand new, and the steering knuckles. So what we're going to do is first put the ball joints on, get those torqued, then the steering knuckles. So now we've got the dust shields on both sides. We've got those all torqued up. So now what we want to do is go ahead and put the hub on, and what we're going to do is pack this with grease, and then we're going to put our nut on and torque that down, and then put the hub on. We are going to wait on putting in the steering rack. We are refinishing that, so that's going to be put on later, but we have plenty of space. All right, so we have our hubs and our bearings all set to go, and our nuts and washers. So now what we're going to do is hand pack each of these bearings, put them in. We're going to put some grease on the spindles, get that nice and lubed, and get these hubs on. Now we did pre-assemble these. If you haven't seen that video, click the link above and it'll all be in the description as well. All right, so we've finished the torsion rods, and what we're going to do here on the bushings, we're going to use 2 of the rubber bushings and 2 of the polyurethane. And you don't want to really use all 4 polyurethane. It creates a too stiff environment where you can break your torsion bar. And the way this goes in is you do the cup, body of the car, your next bushing, and so they cup outwards, and then your torsion bar comes in like that. So now we're going to put this on the car and torque it up. Now we're going to put our bushings on the steering rack, and we'll get out our grease and apply it on the inside. And you'll note on the bushings it says lower, and those are the ones that we're going to be working on right now. On the sides. You know, one is rounded, one is other shape, and put those on. Then we'll go ahead and grease our upper bushings. And now we'll take the steering rack to the car. Then we'll place in our top bushings, press them in. All right, we're going to go ahead and put our clamps, and they do go a special way. So you want to make sure that you line those up and put in our bolts. Then we'll torque those to spec. We already have our tie rod lock nut on, so we're going to go ahead and put the new tie rod on. I'll lock that down just simply for now, just so we can steer it at the body shop. And in this case, we're just putting the castle nut on till it's snug, where we'll torque this down when we get the steering and the other side on. Now we're going to move to the steering rack, and the first thing I want to do is assemble the column, and we just need to go ahead and start feeding in these bolts. And they're kind of tricky on these, but you just basically, the trick I've found is you thread them in and just hold them kind of straight on, and then eventually they'll slide on like so. So we'll want to do both sides. Alright, so now we're going to assemble our steering coupler, and the way we want to do that is take our first washer with the bump out, place our other two bolts in, and that bump out will go in this crevice here and sit perpendicular. Then we want to place our bushing. Just have to make sure you line it up in the right holes. Once that's in, we take our other washer with the bump out facing this way, and it is going to sit behind the coupler. And that way, the next coupler sits on this open side. And just a note, you want to always make sure that the bolts face down. So in the event that for some reason these nuts fall off, these are locking nuts, but just in the event that at least you'll retain some kind of steering. We'll go ahead and snug these up and then torque these to spec. So now we're going to go ahead and put in the steering column. Alright, so we finished up the front suspension on the 260Z. Really stoked to get back on this project. So in the next episode, we're going to start working on the rear suspension. Remember, we want to get this to be a roller so we can get it off to the body shop and get the body fixed and then painted. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys haven't subscribed, consider doing it. Hit that bell notification. Thanks to all the subscribers. Follow me on Instagram at Cars, Bikes, and Coffee for behind the scenes and other things that I'm working on. So until the next one, we'll see you guys then.